There was a moment, right after the champagne flute slipped out of my hand and hit the floor, where the entire party froze. Not because it shattered. It didn't. It bounced. Loudly. Pathetically. Like me. The waiter caught it mid-roll, gave me a tight smile, and kept moving. But all I could think was, even the glass is stronger than I am. Tessa hadn't noticed. She was too busy laughing, loudly, deliberately, with a group of her college friends, the ones with the overstyled hair and voices that carried like warning sirens. I didn't know what the joke was, but I didn't have to. I already knew who the punchline was. Same as always. They say humiliation burns, but this wasn't fire. It was ice. Cold, creeping, slow. I stood there with a hand still half raised from the almost toast we were supposed to do together. She had walked away halfway through it. Said she had to say hi to Max. Max apparently deserved more than I did. Max got a real laugh. Max didn't get called emotionally beige in therapy. That was me. I looked around the room. Dim lights, fake sophistication, abstract art no one understood. Everyone was performing. Every conversation a scene. Every smile a transaction. And me? I didn't know my lines anymore. I hadn't for a while. So I did something simple. Stupid, even. I opened our shared calendar app on my phone, scrolled to the little gold star labeled Wedding, 42 days, and deleted it. Just deleted it. No hesitation. No backup. Gone. That tiny action should have felt dramatic. Cinematic. Instead, it felt like brushing lint off my coat. Tessa was still across the room. She hadn't seen me. She never really did. And in that moment, the silence between us, louder than the jazz quartet in the corner, louder than the clinking forks on tiny overpriced plates, finally said something honest. You're done pretending. And she's been done caring. I walked out. Not stormed. Not ran. Just walked. No one followed. That night should have ended there. But it didn't. Because 35 minutes later, when I opened her messages by instinct, habit, really, I found something waiting that made the mocking feel like a compliment. And that's when the unraveling truly began. I hadn't meant to check her phone. Let's be clear about that. After I walked out of the party, I didn't go home. I didn't go to a bar. I didn't go anywhere that would make narrative sense. Instead, I went to the parking garage beneath our apartment complex and sat inside my car for 23 minutes with the radio off, watching the concrete wall like it might blink first. I only went upstairs because I needed to return her keys. I'd taken her spare by accident, and I figured I'd just toss them on the kitchen counter and leave. That was it. I had a plan. Cold, clean, controlled. But when I walked in, her iPad was still unlocked on the couch. A glowing screen in a dark room. Innocent, like bait. It had a folder open titled Miscellaneous. Nobody names a folder Miscellaneous unless it's hiding something. Recipes? Vacation plans? No. If it were anything harmless, it would have a name like Barcelona 2022 or Vision Board. But Miscellaneous is what you name something when you want it to disappear in plain sight. I don't know what made me do it. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I just sat down, tapped it, and there it was. A video. A video I wasn't supposed to see. She was in a hotel room, laughing, sitting on the edge of a bed in a robe I didn't recognize, holding a flute of something gold and sparkling. The person filming her said, "Say hi to the groom," and she winked. Not at the camera. Past it. At someone else in the room who whistled. The date on the file? 2 weeks ago. The night she told me she was at a late strategy session. The name of the file? Oops_LOL. MOV. I couldn't breathe. My chest didn't hurt. It just flattened. Like I'd been vacuum sealed into this moment. No anger yet. No tears. Just a slow comprehension that everything I thought was stable had always been cracked. I just hadn't turned on the lights to see it. She came home 20 minutes later. Still laughing. Still glowing from the party. Still not seeing me. Even though I was sitting right there in the dark, the screen still lit. She asked why the lights were off. I didn't answer. She walked into the kitchen, poured herself water, didn't even notice my bag sitting by the door. I said, "What's oops_LOL?" She froze. That was the first honest thing she'd done in months. She didn't lie, didn't deny. She just stood there with the glass in her hand, back turned to me, her shoulders rising with a breath she didn't release. That silence. It was louder than screaming. And then she said something that flipped everything. She said, "You weren't supposed to see that." Not, "It's not what you think." Not, "I'm sorry." Not even, "It was a mistake." Just confirmation. Quiet. Cold. Clean. Like I was interrupting something she had already decided was over. I left. This time for real. I didn't even grab my toothbrush. I drove 2 hours to a motel with buzzing lights and a vending machine that took dollar coins. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling and counted every single red flag I had ignored over the past 3 years. I stopped at 42. Not because there weren't more, just because I ran out of will. And the worst part? The part one hate admitting? A tiny part of me still wanted her to call. To chase. To fight for me. She didn't. But her sister did. And what she told me. It changed everything I thought I knew about Tessa. It was just after 4 a.m. when my phone buzzed on the motel nightstand. I was staring at the ceiling, eyes wide open, counting the number of holes in the acoustic tile above me like they were escape routes. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up anyway. I didn't care. I wasn't even sure I existed in that moment. I felt like a placeholder. The voice on the line was familiar, but shaken. "Erwin," she whispered. "It's me, June. Tessa's older sister. We'd barely spoken beyond holiday dinners and the occasional awkward brunch where I usually ended up holding both their purses while they tried on sunglasses. I had no reason to think she'd call me. No reason to trust her. But then she said, "I know you saw it. The video. I warned her that would happen. I told her she's not as careful as she thinks." I sat up slowly. "Why are you calling me?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then she said, "Because you deserve to know this wasn't the first time." At first, I thought she meant cheating. That would have been enough, right? Another guy or two. Some emotional affair with an ex. But that's not what she meant. Not even close. "She's been engaged before," June said, her voice hollow. "Twice." The room tilted. I stared at the peeling wallpaper, as if it might peel back further and show me the life I thought I knew was just a stage set. "What are you talking about?" "She was engaged when she lived in Oregon. And before that, in Toronto. Neither lasted. One guy ended up in the hospital. The other just vanished. She deletes them from her life. Scrubs them clean. You would have been next." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might be sick. I'd known Tessa for 3.5 years. We lived together for 2. I'd met her parents, her co-workers, her high school best friend. Not once did anyone mention ex-fiancés. Not once did she even joke about a serious past relationship. If you asked her, you'd think I was her first kiss. But that wasn't the worst part. June continued, and her voice cracked. "The guy in Oregon? He filed a restraining order after she locked him out of their apartment and claimed he assaulted her when he tried to get back in. I saw the police report. It didn't go anywhere, but she scared the hell out of him. She does this, Erwin. She gets bored, or restless, or angry, and she lights it all on fire. You were just next in line." My hands were numb. I stood, pacing the thin motel carpet, trying to make sense of the spiral I'd just been dropped into. "Why are you telling me this now?" June let out a small, bitter laugh. "Because I thought maybe you were different. You lasted longer than the others. I thought maybe she'd changed. I thought maybe she actually loved you. But when I saw her Instagram story from that party, when I saw how she was looking at that guy next to her, yeah, that was the same look. The one she always gets before she burns it all down." I sat on the edge of the bed and put my head in my hands. I didn't cry. I think my body had forgotten how. I just breathed. Loudly. Slowly. Like if I didn't, my ribs might collapse. "Why didn't you ever tell me before?" "I tried," she said. "She blocked my number on your phone 6 months ago. I sent emails. Left voicemails from a work line. You never replied." I hadn't seen a single one. Because she'd already started cutting my lifelines. And I hadn't even noticed. The call ended with a single sentence that still echoes in my skull like a fire alarm. "She doesn't love you, Erwin. She just collects people like their souvenirs." I didn't sleep after that. Instead, I packed up my bag, checked out of the motel before the sun rose, and drove back to the apartment I was supposed to build a life in. I didn't go to confront her. Not yet. I went to see what else I didn't know. I had a password. I had access. And in the next part of this story, I'll tell you what I found on her computer, because that made the video look like a joke. When I stepped back into our apartment that morning, everything looked the same. That was the first red flag. I expected something to feel different, like the energy had shifted, like a light bulb had burned out or the air was heavier. But no. Her coat was still slung over the back of the kitchen chair like she always left it. The diffuser was still puffing fake lavender into the air, and the stupid bowl of decorative pine cones we argued about last fall still sat untouched on the coffee table. It was like stepping into a museum exhibit labeled Erwin's Delusion. I didn't know what I was looking for at first. My plan was shaky. See what else she's hiding. Like that could ever be a clean process. But once you realize someone's capable of manufacturing an entire version of themselves just for you, it becomes hard to trust anything they've ever touched. So I started with her laptop. Tessa always bragged about how she had nothing to hide. She left her devices out, open, logged in. I used to think that meant she was trustworthy. Now I realized it meant she didn't see me as a threat, because threats pay attention, and I never did. Her desktop background was still the same, a filtered shot of a sunset we never actually saw in person. She told me it was from a trip to Big Sur, but June had once told me they never made it there. Just another performance. I opened her Finder window and checked through documents, pictures, the usual. Nothing. A few resume drafts, some mood boards for product campaigns, tax folders. It was all too clean, scrubbed, sterile. But then I noticed a folder buried 3 layers deep inside her downloads folder, tucked into a chain of nested subfolders with names like temp_assets2 and old workrap_final. The folder was titled Just in Case. That was it. Just in case. No spaces. Inside were over 80 files. PDFs, screenshots, scanned images, audio notes, and dozens of photos. I didn't even know where to begin. My hand shook on the trackpad. I opened the first file randomly, a screenshot of a long text conversation with a contact saved as M. At first I thought it was Max, the guy from the party, but as I read the thread, it was clear this person went way back. They talked in code sometimes. References to people I didn't know. Names she'd never mentioned. Sentences like, "He doesn't suspect a thing. Yet. You were right. Give it 2 years, and they start getting paranoid. Don't worry, I kept a backup. I always do." It was like reading dialogue from a thriller. Like Tessa and M had their own little espionage game going, and I was the idiot Mark in the middle of it. But it didn't stop there. The PDFs? Legal documents. Drafted NDAs. Old leases with different men's names. A scanned copy of a restraining order, but not the one June mentioned. A different one. Different guy. Different city. Same pattern. I opened a folder labeled Voice Notes. There were recordings labeled with dates. I clicked one. It was Tessa's voice, tired but calm. April 3rd, 2:17 a.m. He started asking questions today about the box. I moved it to the storage unit, just in case. Not sure how long I can keep this version going. This version. Like I was one of several. Like she switched identities the way some people switch outfits, according to mood, weather, or audience. I opened another. June's getting suspicious again. If she calls him, I'll just say she's having another episode. Worked last time. I nearly dropped the laptop. My ears were ringing. The apartment suddenly felt too small, like the walls were creeping inward. There's something uniquely horrifying about realizing you've never actually known the person you've spent years building your life around. Not misunderstood. Not drifted apart. Truly never known. The final thing I opened was a document titled Exit Plans. Docs. Inside were bullet points, timelines, password lists, bank account references, some with my name, some without. A checklist labeled Erwin, followed by items like collect final pay stubs, push for joint account update, trigger breakup if honeymoon fund clears, distance from June. I read the list 4 times. Then I started laughing. It wasn't a healthy laugh. It was the kind of sound you make when your brain runs out of normal emotions and just starts throwing darts in the dark. She had planned to leave. She had dates picked. She had a timeline. She had contingency scenarios depending on whether I cried or yelled. I sat there for what felt like hours. Then, finally, I packed a small duffel bag with my essentials, walked out the door, and sent her a single text. I saw everything. Don't contact me. And don't worry, I'm not a threat. Just a ghost. I blocked her number. Blocked her on every platform. Deleted our shared calendar, our playlists, everything. And still, it didn't feel like enough. Because ghosts? They don't get closure. But apparently, neither did her last fiancé. And according to a file I hadn't opened yet, his name wasn't erased. It was buried. I didn't intend to open that last file. Not then. Not while my heart was still hammering like a trapped animal in my chest. After reading Exit Plans, Docs, I shut the laptop and just sat there for hours, motionless, like someone waiting for a fire to finish burning the last piece of a house. The apartment smelled like rosemary from the candle Tessa always kept on the counter. It used to calm me. Now it made me nauseous. But when I finally opened the laptop again, driven more by dread than curiosity, I saw the file sitting at the bottom of the folder like it had been waiting for me. Case_Adler. PDF. That name meant nothing to me. At least, not yet. But something about it made my fingertips cold. I double-clicked. It wasn't just a document. It was a scanned report. Newspaper clippings, witness statements, a detective's notes. Over 30 pages, each one worse than the last. As I scrolled through it, the story unfolded like some cursed puzzle I couldn't stop solving. Nathaniel Adler, 34 years old, software consultant from Portland, engaged to a car, last seen alive in December, 5 years ago. Missing persons report filed by his employer after he failed to return from a weekend trip with his fiancée. Tessa. Only she wasn't Tessa then. She was Talia Carrington. Same face, same hair, different name. The timeline was eerily familiar. Nearly 2 years together. Friends described the relationship as intense, a little isolating. Nathaniel had become distant toward the end, apparently struggling with anxiety, trust issues, paranoia. The investigation into his disappearance went nowhere. No signs of foul play, no evidence of a struggle. His last known credit card transaction? A roadside motel in Northern California. The report theorized that maybe he ran off, started over, had some kind of breakdown. But as I scrolled further, the interviews shifted tone. One of his co-workers said, he told me she was keeping things from him, hiding stuff on her laptop, that he found a folder with someone else's name on it. Then he just stopped coming in. Another friend said, he called me crying one night, said he was afraid to leave her. Like really afraid. I thought he was being dramatic. There was a photo too, blurry, but it was him. And her, smiling, in the same living room I now lived in. Same rug, same coffee table, same goddamn pinecone bowl. It was like she'd recreated their life with me, as if I were just another version of the same failed script. At the bottom of the file, in handwriting that looked like it was scribbled in panic, there was a note from whoever compiled the report. If you're reading this, you need to understand, this isn't about heartbreak. She doesn't leave people. She erases them. I sat there, unable to move. I kept rereading that line. She erases them. And suddenly, everything snapped into place. Her insistence on controlling the shared accounts. The way she always kept a storage unit, even though we had more than enough closet space. Her refusal to post couple photos unless she was in full makeup. The time she freaked out when I asked about her old college yearbooks. The way she carefully shaped my image to her friends, soft, boring, easy to manipulate. I was a template, not a person. I should have called the police right then. But what would I even say? That I found a PDF on my almost wife's laptop linking her to a missing person 5 years ago under another name? That I'd stayed in the same apartment she once shared with someone who vanished without a trace? Instead, I backed everything up. Flash drive, encrypted folders, cloud storage with dead man's triggers. It felt like overkill, but now I wasn't sure what counted as safe anymore. I didn't even know who I could trust. June? Maybe. But even she had secrets. She kept this from me for years. Later that night, I got a notification. Tessa's phone had attempted to log into her laptop. She was back, but I was already gone, and I wasn't planning to be the next case file. The night after I fled the apartment, I stayed in a cheap rental cabin 3 hours upstate, the kind of place with dusty air vents and furniture that looked like it came from a 1998 dentist's waiting room. I picked it precisely because it was forgettable. No Wi-Fi, no cameras, just me, a thermos of gas station coffee, and the tiny glow of my laptop screen. I went back to the Adler file, not to punish myself, but because I couldn't leave it alone. Something about his face haunted me, not just because he looked like me, but because the look in his eyes in the last photo, the final public one before he disappeared, reminded me of what I'd seen in the mirror these past few weeks. The quiet dread, the uncertainty, the smile that's still there because you hope you're wrong. Hope that your gut is lying to you. But there was one detail in the case that stood out. A name buried deep in the original police report, listed as a known associate, interviewed but never followed up with. No address, no notes, just Micah Dreer, acquaintance from Toronto. I searched the name, It was like chasing smoke. Dozens of dead links, disconnected social media profiles, inactive emails. But then, buried in a now-defunct blog from 10 years ago, I found a comment left by someone with that exact name. And in it, he mentioned a forum, HeartSafe, for survivors of high-control relationships. The forum still existed. Obscure, unindexed by Google, protected by a login wall. I applied for access with a burner email and a vague sob story. It took 24 hours. Once I got in, I searched the name Micah Dreer. One post, dated 5 years ago, titled, "How do you warn someone who doesn't know they're in danger?" It started with a strange introduction. You never think you'll be the villain in someone else's love story. But that's what she made me. He didn't mention her name, just that she was charismatic, mesmerizing, made you feel like she'd sculpted you out of clay and you owed her for giving you form. He described the same pattern I'd lived, the fast intimacy, the emotional microcuts, the quiet withdrawal of warmth, the way she rewrote history even as you were living it. It was like reading my own memories in someone else's voice. At the bottom of the post, he left an encrypted Proton mail address. It had been years, but I tried anyway. I wrote the kind of message you only send when you don't care if it makes you sound crazy. I think she's doing it again. I found your name in a missing persons report. I'm not trying to expose her. I'm just trying to make sure I survive. If you're still out there, please respond. I didn't expect a reply. Not really. I went to bed fully convinced I'd hit another wall. But the next morning, there it was. One sentence. If it's her, get rid of anything she ever touched and meet me at the Glenmont Library parking lot. Bring proof. Come alone. My hands were shaking as I reread it. My first thought was, this could be a trap. Maybe she had someone monitoring for this. Maybe she knew I'd go looking. But I could not go. I needed answers more than I needed safety. So I burned the flash drives. I scrubbed the backups. I wiped the laptop. Everything but one small encrypted drive I kept in my coat pocket, one she'd never seen before. And I drove. The Glenmont Library was small. The kind of place where time stood still and books outnumbered people. The parking lot was half empty. I sat in my car for 20 minutes before I saw someone pull up 2 rows down. A man in his 40s, hair pulled back, thick glasses, eyes constantly scanning. He looked like a prepper who decided to go corporate for a week. He approached slowly, his hands visible. "You Erwin?" he asked without emotion. I nodded. He didn't shake my hand. Didn't smile. Just opened his coat slightly to show me a flash of what looked like a press badge, or a fake version of one. He handed me a notebook. "Write down what you found. No names. No places. Just patterns." So I did. I wrote down the folder names, the exit plans, the voice memos, the past aliases, the missing fiancé, the conversation with June. And all the while, Micah watched me, not like he was waiting for answers, but like he was trying to see if I'd say something wrong. Finally, he spoke. "You know she wasn't always this polished, right? Back in Toronto, she was chaotic, messy, but she learned. She learned how to blend, how to erase traces. I got out because I staged a breakdown, pretended to be unstable so she'd be the one to leave. But I know 3 others who didn't get that lucky." I leaned forward. "Are they gone?" he said flatly. "Some legally, some not so clearly. One changed countries. One disappeared off the grid entirely." He reached into his bag and handed me a folder. "This is everything we've been able to piece together. Not enough to make a case. Just enough to see the shape of the thing. You need to vanish, Erwin. Not from her. From the story she's writing. Right now, you're still a character. Still part of her arc. The only way out is to be cut from the script." I asked him the question that had been gnawing at me since the first voicemail. Why does she do this? Micah looked at me like I was the last person in the world to still believe in reason. Because she can. That night, I booked a new identity under a temporary program Micah had access to, some shadowy network for high-risk victims of psychological predators. It sounded insane, but so did everything else. But before I left for good, I needed to do one last thing. Not revenge. Not closure. A warning. Micah told me not to contact her. Not directly. Not indirectly. Not even symbolically. He said any message, any acknowledgement, was a thread she could pull on. That predators like her didn't respond to confrontation. They responded to control. He told me that people like Tessa don't chase you out of love. They chase you out of ego. And when the chase ends, they move on. But I couldn't walk away clean. Not yet. There was still one person I hadn't thought about. Not until that night. Her mother, Margaret Baines. Prim, conservative, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and always on her third glass of wine before appetizers even hit the table. Every time we'd visited, she would size me up like I was a used car with a suspicious price tag. At the time, I thought she didn't like me. Now I wonder if she recognized something. Or worse, knew everything. I had to try. I wrote a letter. Not to Tessa. To Margaret. No return address. No signature. Just a carefully worded, tightly constructed 2 pages that laid out everything I'd uncovered without sounding unhinged. No dramatics. Just facts. Just enough to rattle something loose. I mailed it from a post office an hour outside the cabin I was using as a hideout. I wore gloves. I paid in cash. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia is just pattern recognition in a dangerous world. Then I waited. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I received an email on my burner account from an unlisted address with no subject. Just one line in the body. You don't know what you've started. I stared at it for hours, rereading it like it might change. I didn't know who sent it. It could have been Tessa. It could have been her mother. It could have been someone else entirely. But the wording chilled me. Not a denial, not a threat, not even a plea. It was a statement. That same night, Micah messaged me one word. Move. I didn't ask questions. I packed everything into one duffel and left the cabin before sunrise. Switched cars. Used cash. Drove 6 hours north and crossed the state line. 2 days later, the cabin burned down. They said it was a gas leak. Only problem? The cabin didn't have gas. That was when I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just Tessa covering her tracks. This was deeper, wider. She didn't just walk away from her past. She eliminated it. Systematically. Methodically. Like pruning a tree that dared grow in the wrong direction. Micah confirmed what I feared. He called me, voice tense. Someone's funding her. This isn't just her being clever. She's connected to something. She's had help for years. Financial, legal, maybe even institutional. I asked the obvious. Like what? A cult? He paused. Not the robe-wearing kind. The elite kind. She's changed her name 5 times across 3 countries. You don't do that alone. Not cleanly. She's got a sponsor. Or a handler. Or both. That's when he sent me the final document in his archive. A court transcript. Unpublished. Sealed. Leaked only through someone he trusted. It was from 6 years ago, involving a civil case in Ontario. The plaintiff, a man named Lionel Kress, accused Talia Carrington of fraud, emotional coercion, and identity manipulation. The details were vague, redacted in places, but one line stood out. The defendant maintained multiple concurrent lives and used romantic entanglement to extract personal and financial resources, often severing all ties after implanting false narratives about mental instability or misconduct. The case was dismissed. The plaintiff was later committed to a psychiatric facility. I didn't know what to do with that information. Was it real? Was it planted? Was this what happened to anyone who tried to stop her? That night, I received another message. Not from Micah. Not from any known address. It was a video file. No subject line. Just the file. Mirror. MOV. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. And what I saw, it wasn't her. It was me. In my old apartment. On the phone. Pacing. Laughing. Crying. Private moments. From angles that didn't make sense. Audio too clear. She had been recording me. For months. Maybe longer. And if she still had this, what else did she have? I looked up from the laptop. My reflection in the black screen stared back at me. Only it didn't feel like me anymore. It felt like a version of myself she'd left behind. Still trapped. Still waiting. Still smiling on cue. The morning after I saw the video of myself, I drove 6 hours without stopping. No music. No podcasts. Just road. Asphalt unfolding like a tightrope between the person I was and the person I refused to be again. I crossed into a town so small it didn't have a hotel. Just a single, rust-colored inn with no signage and a front desk clerk who looked like he was born in the chair he sat in. That's where I stayed. For 3 weeks. Off-grid. No digital footprints. I threw out my phone. Bought a burner. Paid cash. Cut ties with everyone I ever knew, except Micah and, strangely, June. Yes, Tessa's sister. Because just when I thought this story had finally closed in on itself, June reached out again. She didn't say much in her message. Just, I've been offered immunity. I'm going to testify. You're not alone. Testify? The next few weeks were a blur. Turns out, Margaret Baines, Tessa's mother, had received my letter. And she'd known. Not everything, but enough. Enough to push for an internal investigation through one of her contacts in law enforcement. Turns out she'd suspected for years, ever since Tessa's father vanished from their lives when she was 15. No body, no note, just gone. But Margaret never had proof. And she was scared. Scared of her daughter. Until now. Between Micah's archive, June's confession, and the digital backup I thought I'd destroyed, Micah had made his own copy. It was finally enough. They didn't arrest her right away. People like Tessa are insulated. Strategic. She had lawyers on retainer, property in 3 provinces, and contacts who cleaned up after her. But the paper trail was there now. Names. Patterns. Dates. A mosaic of broken men and broken laws she could no longer outrun. I didn't testify. I didn't need to. They had what they needed. I got the call one rainy Tuesday morning. Tessa Baines, also known as Talia Carrington, also known as Mallory Hines, is in custody. Just like that. No dramatic confrontation. No final monologue. No movie ending. Just a quiet voice on the phone confirming that the ghost who haunted my life had finally been caught in the light. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I just felt tired. But the good kind of tired. The kind that comes after you've been holding your breath for years and finally exhale. It didn't fix everything. I still flinch when I hear the wrong ringtone. I still double-check hotel rooms for hidden cameras. I still wake up some nights thinking she's sitting in the corner, watching me sleep with that smile. But I'm healing. I changed my name, legally, this time. Not to disappear, but to start over. For the first time in my life, I get to be someone without fear attached to it. No shadows. No second-guessing. No script someone else is writing for me. I live in a small coastal town now. I work at a repair shop. I take long walks near the cliffs, drink terrible coffee, and say good morning to strangers who don't know anything about me. And that's the beauty of it. I'm no longer her story. I'm my own. One day, I might fall in love again. Not because I need to, but because I want to. Because I'll know how to see the signs. Because I'll recognize the difference between a partner and a performance. And when I do, I'll tell them everything. Not to scare them, but to prove something. That I survived. And she didn't win.